Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas. I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Shute.
And today on the Online Great Books podcast, we're going to talk about Yukio Mishima's book, Sun and Steel. He is the third author, I think, that we've talked about twice. We've had done a couple
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, we've done a couple of Tolkien books or pieces, and a Walker Percy, I think, and then now this guy.
Haven't we done Nietzsche twice?
We're fitting to.
Haven't we done My Friend Friedrich a couple times?
I don't know. I don't think so. We need to.
Well, and today is a very special show because we have a guest.
Yeah, we have our friend and boss from Barbell Logic.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. I think, at least 3 bosses, and 2 of them are on this podcast.
Oh, no. Melissa.
I've said many times. First off, thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure.
I'm excited to be on the show. I feel wildly unqualified. I'm happy that we are going to be talking about a book today from a famous author who basically shunned his previous intellectual career and basically gave rise to his physical prowess. And so it's the only way that I could, if we were doing a podcast on Aristotle, I would probably have politely declined.
No.
Oh, it would be so much fun.
No, Aristotle.
But since this guy decided that words are corrosive and that steel is awesome, then we're right up my alley.
Yeah, I think he's right. So a lot of folks don't know, but Matt was my co-host, or I was his co-host on the Barbell Logic podcast for, I don't know, around 700 hours or something like that until last
many
June.
Years. Yeah.
And this show here, I guess, is a weird cousin of the Barbell Logic show. And then, of course, the Music and Ideas show is me and Karl and Trent. And Trent used to engineer and produce that show, the Barbell Logic show. So we're all pod buddies and and
sisters as they would.
Yeah. Yeah, so Matt is
yes.
Matt's a former strongman, a business owner, a father, a Calvinist, and
there we go.
And a normie. By the way, you owe me a discussion. You owe me a book discussion, Matt.
I do.
Yeah, we'll cover this one time. You just say when we talk about
Confessions.
No. That systemic
Not
heresy book, that Gudam. What is it?
Systematic Theology.
Oh, okay. Yeah, systematic.
I thought we were supposed to do Lonesome Dove. I read 1,000 pages of that thing, and we still haven't.
I could do that one too. I love Lonesome Dove.
Yeah, we need to do the good.
Big fan. Big fan of systematic theology too. Yeah. No, you're not. That's okay.
No, that book right there is. Well, we could save it for the show. It is postmodern.
Yeah, we should save it for the show.
It is postmodern in its outlook. I think I could put you off of it.
It's crazy that you would. Yeah, I mean, from someone who is so deeply rooted in the classics, I could see how they would take anyone who is reformed and has an outlook from the 1500s and say that they're
not reformed, revolutionary,
and say that they're postmodern.
No. Calvin and Martin Luther and Francis Bacon are the birth of postmodernism.
Shots fired.
Who do you like?
Yukio Mishima. Let's agree on that guy.
So we've talked about this guy before. We read his book, Sound of Waves, which Karl said is the perfect little book.
Yeah, it's just a great novel. You'd read Sun and Steel and you think, well, that one's going to be all about suicide and death and blood. And it's not. It's just, It's wonderful. I highly recommend Sun and Steel. Sound of Waves. And he's got a bunch of other ones, which I'm probably going to dig into. This one is a late work of his. It's very odd. What's attractive about it for us, and why we thought to get Matt on, was the emphasis on the power of steel to do something to the self. When I read Mishima, I think when he's talking about himself, I think I can relate. He has this image of these little white ants that are words that corrode the thing. What are they, termites or something? I don't know, whatever they have in Japan. That his focus on words, he was a bookish kid, And he would go into the dark and he would write these novels and stories and everything and cultivate all of that. I don't know how to say this. Scott has said sometimes he thinks some people don't have an internal monologue. I think that's probably true. But I think some of us, myself included, have too much internal monologue.
Yes.
Yeah, Mishima. This book's 108 pages, by the way. If I bought the Kindle edition, and I had read like 90 pages, and it said I'd only read 26% of it, and I was in a panic. But the stupid Kindle edition repeats the book 3 times.
Oh, that's weird. It wouldn't even let me get the Kindle edition. I ordered the paperback. It isn't going to be here till tomorrow. And so I had to pull the whole download the PDF and printed it out. Which I realize is so one, I stole the book, but I also bought the book. So I at least bought the book. It's just not here yet. So yeah, I ended up printing the thing out. And so, I mean, it's double-sided print. It's only 50 pages. And it's really interesting. You know, what Karl was saying, it's interesting. He has this, to piggyback off that, where he talked about how the corrosion of words damages the integrity of the man of action. So it was like he is seeing that he had this internal monologue that was too much, right? That there was too much. It was this great emphasis on words and words alone, and that the words alone never led to action. It didn't take him to the place that he actually wanted to be, and it left this hole. You could tell he was searching for something greater. And in his later life, which was, in fact, his mid-30s, not his 80s, he became a man of action, and he discovered the physical side of this thing, right? And it's interesting because you then, the whole book is sort of playing on this sort of battle between the corrosion of words and flesh, and like what's the correct balance. And you could tell that he had a real internal struggle with
balance.
it.
I'm not sure he found that.
And it's super interesting. Super interesting.
Should we spoil it and tell people how he ended?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, did you talk about that when you talked about the
Mishima incident? You can all look that up.
I love it.
It's the most Japanese way to die.
So I think he was born in 1930, or maybe it was 1928, something like this. This is from memory. Somebody will correct me. 1925. There you go. So in 1945, he was 20.
1925.
And we know what happened in 45. He was in the military, but he never saw action.
Yeah.
And
didn't go well for Japan.
He was a citizen of Japan, a subject of the emperor, and the emperor and his staffers surrendered to the United States on that battleship, and he never really did. In the mid-'60s, he started a group called the Shield Society, and I think it was in 70. They staged an attempted coup to overthrow the Marshall Plan government that the United States had installed there, and to reinstate the emperor. The Shield Society knew that they would fail, and he committed harikiri on television. And a few works were released posthumously, so he knew this was all part of his plan. He had, I think that he ultimately saw controlling one's death as one of the most noble and proper ways for a person to act, particularly Japanese. Brings up a lot of interesting things, you know. So if your Mishima in your family is literally a long line of samurai, and your emperor cucks, how do you surrender? What does that look like?
Well, if the emperor had been divine, had claimed divinity for 2,000 years or something, and then all of a sudden says, "Nope,"
right?
That's a big step. But that's not really what I want to talk about. The end. I mean, you can see a lot of it in this book. You guys have page numbers. I want to read a quote.
But I'll get close.
It's somewhere around page 7. I have Kindle page numbers.
Right.
If myself was my dwelling, then my body resembled an orchard that surrounded it. I could either cultivate that orchard to its capacity or leave it for the weeds to run riot in. I was free to choose, but the freedom was not as obvious as it might seem. Many people do indeed go so far as to refer to the orchards of their dwellings as destiny. One day, it occurred to me to set about cultivating my orchard for all I was worth. For my purpose, I used sun and steel. Well, there you go. There's the title. That's a nice paragraph.
I always love it when, I'm sure you guys do this all the time on this podcast, but when you've got the whole section underlined, that whole section is underlined for me that Karl just read, because it's such a powerful piece. I do this. I mean, I'm a middle-aged, hashtag neat dad. I love taking care of my yard. I love to, like Scott, your farm, you're out working in your farm. I've got my land. I love cultivating the land. So that idea of spending the time actually cultivating the land, cultivating the yard, making it like the orchard produce good fruit and not just be productive, but also look great, right? There's this idea of what a cultivated orchard looks like. And he starts to see his own body as like, wait a minute, that is my orchard. I can actually, and then you actually see a lot of this discussion throughout the book of, it's not just about the looks of the cultivation of the orchard, but the actual performance or the production of the fruit, that building the strength that he got out of the sun and out of the steel, primarily the steel. Super interesting.
Unceasing sunlight and implementation of steel became the chief elements in my husbandry. Yeah, so he takes responsibility for his body. And he does this as a reaction to this decision by words. Page 16, he says, granted that my flesh in infancy had made itself apparent in intellectual guise, corroded by words, then should it not be possible to reverse the process, to extend the scope of an idea from the spirit to the flesh until the whole physical being became a suit of armor forged of the metal of that concept? He keeps going. He goes on and on about that. So, he wants to cultivate his body. But then around that page 6, he starts talking about making ideas concrete in the form of his body, and when his body was right, the ideas would be right. Am I wrong about that, Karl? Karl's grinning as much as Karl can.
Yeah, it gets pretty metaphysical in this book. I don't know how to go from the particular to the abstract to the universal. And for him, the getting your muscles, I'm not going to be able to find the quote, but getting your muscles to be stronger and larger is to join the universal. So the slumping belly and the caving in chest he talks about as almost like moral failures. Your perversions are particular. Your glory is universal.
Is he trying to make his body the Platonic form of humanness? Is he trying to tap into the universal by approaching that perfection? Is that what it is?
Yeah, except here's the cool part. The form is physical. This thing about words,
that hit you was that a little close to home, Karl?
It's hits me close to home. So this is a little bit of a personal story. So Catholics generally, well, some of us go to therapy, but we have this confession thing. Okay, I remember I was in once, and I was stopped by the monastery and went in. And I was talking to the priest, and I was given all sorts of words and everything. He was an old guy, and he finally stopped and he says, "You know what? You talk real well about this, but you ought to just stop." Whatever I was talking about, I had all the theory and all of the words and the concepts, and to explain, all the reasons why I was screwing up. And he just said, to hell with the words. In the end, it's action, that there's a primacy of action in the physical to all the words that we make to, we do crazy things with words. They're my business, but it's I remember I was reading Jonathan Haidt wrote a book. I can't remember what it's called, but in the middle of it, he talks about, he comes down and there's a cake in the fridge and he eats the cake. And then his wife comes down and sees that the cake is gone, or a big chunk of it's gone, and says, "Why did you do that?" And now he starts coming up with words. "Well, because I had a rough day, I deserved it." Or, "Remember that other day you did this thing? Well, I needed the cake." And so he comes up with words to justify the action that he did, but it's all bullshit, frankly. After the fact, rationalization, little white ants, in Mishima's terms.
I'm interested. One of the things that I'd be interested from you guys, knowing that you're far more well-read than I, it's always weird to have a conversation with guys like you who, for most of the people that I run with, I'm the well-read guy. I read all the time. I'm constantly reading, but you are both so well-read. If you didn't know the author here, and you didn't know his story, where would you place the timeline of this book? Because to me, it's not 1970. This feels like I'm reading something out of the shogunate, right? Like it's this guy, it's 1300. And part of that is in the how much is lost in the translation. Like I know it's been written in Japanese, therefore it's translated into English, and so I don't know how well we can read English classical literature, and by its very nature, because English is our primary language, we can pick up on the fact that it's old, right? It's a little more different. But I'm looking at this and I'm reading it and I'm going, this does not sound like it was written 50 years ago. It sounds like it was written 700 years ago.
Is it like a samurai in the full outfit in his garden with a calligraphy brush?
That's exactly what it sounds like to me. And I think a lot of it's because that's who he idolized, right? I mean, is that not who he tried to become at the end?
Well, I mean, he was a samurai. I become my
right.
His uncles, his grandparents,
but not for the first 30 years of his life.
You said
right, and so he's writing now from the perspective of someone who is a modern day samurai, but it doesn't feel like modern day.
Tokugawa.
It feels like 700 years ago.
I read it, and other than those weird death themes that we'll get into, and even a little bit of that, he's saying stuff that Socrates and Aristotle and those guys said. Those guys had to drop everything and go to war anytime. That's part of what being a citizen was, and they were big on gymnasium, and it was body and mind for those guys, and it was closely linked. And and he talks about the Greeks a little bit too. Yeah, it doesn't read like 1970, and that's why I love him. Well, I want to read this chunk. I'd always felt that such signs of physical individuality as a bulging belly, sign of spiritual sloth, or a flat chest with protruding ribs, sign of an unduly nervous sensibility, were extremely ugly, and I could contain my surprise when I discovered that there were people who loved such signs. To me, these could only seem acts of shameless indecency, as though the owner were exposing his spiritual pudenda on the outside of his body. They represented one type of narcissism that I could never forgive. I've got a friend. He's like, I hope this mask stuff, this COVID mask stuff, he's like, I hope it ends because all these ugly fuckers are covering their face, and it's just everything much more pleasant for me. He's serious as he could possibly be. Like, I get hate mail for every show, so it doesn't matter. I don't take it quite. I know you're too pleasant. I don't take it necessarily to this guy's extreme, but
I never get hate mail.
There is sort of a narcissism in just like the flagrant neglect of appearance, hygiene, etc. You go to Walmart and you see the crazy person that's in their house shoes that are filthy and they're enormous, and like you can see parts of their body that clothes normally cover.
When the cover of Cosmo magazine is a 600-pound person and says, this is what beauty looks like today. And if you don't think so, you're fat shaming. Like, no, that person's morbidly obese and has 1 foot, 1 3/4 feet in the grave already. It's not, in fact, isn't okay. Like there are parts of this, and I'm sure he probably dealt with this too. There are things that none of us are born physically or mentally or socially perfect in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, as the Calvinist, I think we're all completely screwed up. But I also do think that on some, if we're focused on the physical, there are things that we have control over, right? We have control over the bulging belly, the flat chest. You don't necessarily have control over how far apart your eyes are, right? Or if your ears are asymmetrical. Like those things can't be changed. But you could see for him to say, in that passage you just read, Scott, like that, it represents to him a type of narcissism that is unforgivable. Like it literally says, like, he flips it. Everyone looks at bodybuilders and says, you're the narcissist. You assholes that are sitting around doing nothing, getting fat, don't care, right? Don't care about your appearance.
Put your spiritual pudenda away.
Spiritual pudenda. It's amazing.
I love that. We don't use pudenda enough.
We don't, and we also don't then relate it to to spirituality very often. Right? It's a great line.
Yeah, I like that, the way that's flipped. So when you take charge of your, I'm gonna agree with Mishima here. when you take charge of your physicality, when you hire one of us, maybe start training and get your stuff together, this is where it's a little weird. For Mishima, you're not becoming more of an individual. You're becoming less of one.
Yeah.
You're becoming more of the classical figure from ancient Greece. The ideal man, where your muscles are looking like they should look. And the sagging belly and everything, when you let it go wrong, that's when it becomes particularized.
I think people demonstrate that too. They're like, hey, man, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to be who I want to be. I'm going to look how I want to look. And, if I weigh 345, you're supposed to be attracted to me no matter what, because this is me. Even in the modern U.S., I think a lot of that neglect of the body is about exercising your right to be an individual, whatever the heck that means.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Gross, slothful license.
That's well said.
Matt Reynolds, do you agree 100% with Mishima then? I want to try to get Matt to agree with everything Mishima says.
I would. I just want to be clear that sometimes people will take, and just like you do, just like they do with you, is that I got a bunch of hate mail bullshit a while ago for saying some things about, I was being interviewed on a podcast, and I was talking about a female, how females can't really get bulky. How it's not really possible to get bulky the way culturally we, like too muscular, too whatever, that the only way to do that, to really like appear too bulky, is that either A, they're taking performance enhancing drugs, which, most of our middle-aged clients certainly aren't, or often someone starts in this very unhealthy, morbidly obese, I use the word sloppy, and what you don't understand is they've lost 30 or 40 pounds, and they're still 265, and then somebody sees them for the first time and says, well, that person's too, it's amazing. So of course I get in trouble for saying that when they started at 320 that they were sloppy. Like, how dare you judge anybody for that? Was the bullshit that I heard. And when I want to be clear, like it was obvious for Mishima as well. Like, this is a process that takes time, right? That it's actually the process. You could see he was constantly working on this thing. This was a 10-year thing that occurred, right? This wasn't like you woke up one day and he went from a sloth with the bulging belly and the flat chest and to his version of a bodybuilder, of a classical Greek model. And so I think the idea there is that he's trying to promote is that we are trying to constantly refine ourselves and get better, not just in the intellectual, which I think he had spent this previous 30 years doing, and found that it was incomplete, but to say like that there's a real value in this to do the same thing on the physical side. And it's this idea that we constantly talk about at Barbell Logic and just among each other of voluntary hardship. He understood that as much as he studied and as much as he read and as much as he wrote, there was this missing piece of the pie, of the voluntary hardship pie. And until he pursued the voluntary hardship of physical strength, of the sun and steel, he was unable to complete it. And I think his argument is that anyone on earth who isn't able to, or who hasn't been through that fire, who hasn't tried to do that thing and been refined, has not been able to achieve that completion of that voluntary hardship. And so it's,
yes,
of course, yeah, I absolutely would agree with that idea.
It's not just about the hardship, though. He really is in the aesthetics. Like, he's got to express that wordless beauty. And then when he does that, he can think more clearly, and then he can act, and he becomes complete.
Yes.
Yeah, he says, I was recognizing the identical origin of the formal beauty in the wordless body and the formal beauty in words. I was beginning to seek a kind of Platonic idea that would make it possible to put the flesh and words on the same footing. The United States needs this. We need this real bad. Modernity needs this real bad. I'm taking welding, Matt Reynolds. I talk about it every show now. I'm taking a welding class at the local vocational school. I'm the oldest guy in class.
Nice.
Of course. And a bunch of 18-year-olds, yeah. There's this one kid, he looks like Don Knotts.
Yeah, you get him.
He wears like a 7 1/8 hat. Like, he's got a head like a pencil eraser. He's just got a little bitty head. And he's wearing this welding cap, and it's bright red. I wasn't going to tell this story. I'm going to tell it. Because he has such a tiny head, the hats, like welding caps, are real tall, and it's bright red. And his name, all those kids are named Cooper. I've been through this before. So I'm like, hey, Cooper, where do you get these receptacle tip welding hats? And he's like, oh. Like they just can't take it. Like they don't get picked on. They don't do all that workplace grab ass stuff that we used to do, like on construction sites and stuff. But anyway, we're taking this welding class. Right. I can tell that these young men have a little, like most of them want to be pipeline welders. They're trying to take on a career, and our teacher, Mr. Cooper, is doing his best to help them. They make great money. These young guys are going to make $100,000 at 20 years old, and then go up from there. But you can tell that they have a little. They're like, "What do you do, Hambrick?" And I tell them, "Well, it's hard to explain to them."
Well, I'm semi-retired, but now I work more than I ever have. One of those,
right? But they've got a little bit of an inferiority complex because they live in the modern United States and they intend to do something with their hands for a living. Got this thing now where we have a caste system that has emerged in the United States. Like, well, if you have a white-collar job, if you're a knowledge worker, you're a certain kind of person. But if you actually do things with your hands or rely on your body every day to work, well, then, you failed, something went wrong, right? And the natural extension of that idea is that to use your body is base. To use your body is an inferior use of the human being.
That's right.
QED, because of all this stuff, we have people, particularly young men, who eschew the body. They are disconnected from their bodies, and they don't like their bodies, and they keep a great deal of distance from them. I think that's where you get the 5'10" guy that weighs $127 in the skinny jeans. If he knows, this is subconscious, I think, but I think that there's something about him that's like, if I can communicate by my appearance that I'm unable to do physical things, they're not a plumber, and that I must be up in my mind, and I'm a knowledge worker, and I'm a certain kind of high caste, CASTE, American modern person. That ain't so. So we have, young people, you lock them up in their house for a year, they play video games, their life is online, working with your hands is gross and dirty and only for immigrants, blah, blah, blah. And we end up with these broken people with low sperm counts who are ineffectual, can't fix a dripping faucet, and are just at the whim of reality. Frankly, we need to put this flesh and words on the same footing, like Mishima's asking.
Yeah, it's all the worst parts of Platonism. Darn those video games. One of our colleagues said on one of the Slack channels to somebody, you need to play more video games. And I didn't respond, but I just sat there and I looked at it and said, no, I don't. I really don't. I need to go plant my radishes. That the return to the physical, we're too much in our heads, I think, to the detriment of the body. But I want to go back to something Matt was talking about, the aesthetic aspect of the body. I think it is important. This is a dangerous topic to talk about. I had a student, one of the best students I ever had, who somebody made some comment about her looking a little heavy. And 9 years later, she's dead from starving herself. I mean, there is that. But on the other hand, you don't know the glories that your body is capable of. You got to take care of it, and you got to lift heavy things. There's this line that made me hit my macros a little stronger this week. Let's see. So this is somewhere around page 24. The need for me to train my body could have been foreseen from that moment when I first felt the attraction of the surface profundities. I was aware that the only thing that could justify such an idea was muscle. Who pays any attention to a physical education theorist grown decrepit? So I thought, all right. I guess I'll hit my numbers this week. Because it's important. The physical presentation you make, it's your body that expresses your ideas, and it's not just by words.
That's right. Again, in modernity, we tend to judge for or look down upon people for judging a book by its cover, but isn't what we're really trying to do. I'm trying to look the part of what I believe. I actually want somebody to look at me and go this guy looks like he owns a fitness company. He's a CEO of of a large scale business. He's smart. He's not a meathead. He's like and finding that balance is not always easy. Not just, certainly that's understated. It's nearly impossible, right? But you also see from him, he says, you can see that he understands that there's this two-way street, or there's this one-way street thing that's occurring, where he says, like, he was unable to improve his flesh from the intellectual alone. And yet, he says, and yet it seemed to me that the flesh could be intellectualized to a higher degree, could achieve closer intimacy with ideas than the spirit. So it's like he notes, it's not a two-way street, that for him, the intellectual actually also came up when he was able to drive up his physical ability, the way he looked, right? And then, Scott, you were saying too a little bit ago, when he calls back to I love it, he starts to really note the struggle or the problem of modernity when he's speaking to, he says, the groups of muscles that have become virtually unnecessary in modern life, though still a vital element of a man's body, are obviously pointless from a practical point of view, and bulging muscles are as unnecessary as a classical education is to the majority of practical men. Muscles have gradually become something akin to classical Greek. To revive the dead language, the discipline of the steel was required. To change the silence of death into the eloquence of life, the aid of steel was essential.
I know. I'm around in this point, and that's when I texted Karl. I was like, "Can we have Reynolds on the show?" I always like it when we have the same things.
Yeah, I have that whole paragraph outlined.
So good. It feels so good. Yeah. I think most of the people that listen to the show know, but I'll say it again anyway. All three of us are barbell coaches. We help people use not the steel, cast iron, and the steel barbell to get real strong. And some of us here are, from time to time, very, very strong. We teach people how to squat, deadlift, press, and bench press, lead normal people, normal homeschool moms and 61-year-old IT dudes to compete in public to lift as much weight as they possibly can and test their bodies to the most. And, you guys listen to the show, Karl and I read these books and talk about this stuff all the time. And then when we're not doing this, we're probably thinking about how to lift something better or teach somebody else how to do it better. We've spent a great deal of time on this. I came to it later in my life than these two guys did. But as a result of coming to it later, I think like Mishima did, the differences in mind and body are more stark for somebody who doesn't do this at all and then comes to it at 35 years old or 40 years old or 60 years old. And I have experienced that. Everything is better. Every single thing is better if your deadlift goes up.
Sure. And it makes your novels better. Apparently. So says Mishima.
Is that why Truman Capote sucks?
So there's let's see, this is a little bit before 27. Bulging muscles, a taut stomach, and tough skin, I reasoned, would correspond respectively to an intrepid fighting spirit, the power of dispassionate intellectual judgment, and a robust disposition. The mind and the body are connected. This is a hard idea for a lot of us. The mind and the body are connected. This is right after the bit about the bulging belly. And so you get your physical house in order, and you find out, you might find out things don't bother you as much. That you might dispassionate intellectual judgment. Well, all right, something crazy happened in the news, but I can still deadlift 500 pounds. And you feel, one thing I noticed in being in rooms with coaches is the way they fill the space. And I don't mean that they take up more space, although they usually do. Yeah, I used to like that because I would feel normal sized. I'm not as tall as
I
you
think
guys,
of you as small. It's hilarious.
Right.
I'm like, Karl, he's very small, a little small guy.
Yeah, I am. I'm under 6 feet, and I'm
small guy that bench presses 500 pounds.
Not yet. But but they just stand differently, stride the earth differently. And if you, dear listener, could partake of that, I think it would be a good thing. This is not just for meatheads, although good for meatheads. I think this book is an aesthetic project. Okay, so it's Nietzschean. It's like take your life and make it a project, make it a beautiful life. And you're going to need sun and steel for that.
Yeah.
That's the appeal.
There's a thing that we deal with in our culture a lot too, that I specifically our niche, for those that have been in the strength niche, that I think sometimes the pendulum gets swung too far that direction as well. We've seen that powerlifting has developed a reputation for pursuing strength and a complete lack of aesthetics. And I think there's some emptiness there as well, right? In the same way that I think that bodybuilding, when the goal is to only get on stage and have a beauty pageant with other guys in a pink thong piece of underwear, like, is also, that's not, you're missing the mark, right? Now it's certainly better than being the sloth on the couch watching Netflix all day, but Mishima really started to see the connection between aesthetics, the strength, and what the feeling of the strength, what the gain, like, you know, he literally kind of talks about titrating the weight up. As I added more weight, like, I could see the strength was mine and the strength belonged to the steel itself. Like, there was this battle that was going on there. And then the way that then improved his own, the intelligence portion, like, he felt like that really came into fruition as well. So he saw the connection between all of them. And I think when we lean into, we all know people who are, all they want to be is they want to be the smartest guy in the room, but they're that, again, that, you know, their skin is pasty white and they look awful. And then you've got the bodybuilder often on the other side, who is as a body of a Greek god, but an IQ of 68 and doesn't care to ever make it better. You've got the power lifter sometimes who is incredibly strong but weighs 360 pounds and is also morbidly obese, but can perform, right? It's the thing that I've struggled with for a lot of my life. And I think as I read this, because most of your listeners don't know me, I've gone through a period of time when I'm an ex-pro strongman. I was a relatively high-level power lifter, but I spent most of my life trying to gain a ton of weight to get as strong as I could, and now here I am in my early 40s, and I'm like, 300 pounds isn't healthy anymore. And so I've worked really hard for the last 4 or 5 months to lose. I've lost 32, 33 pounds. I've lost 8 inches off my waist. My strength is still pretty good, but not as good as it was then. But I look a lot better, and I feel a lot better. I'm a lot healthier, and everything seems to just be firing on all cylinders better. And so I haven't found the perfect balance of that either, but there are these places where you can always push the envelope too much in one, and this thing is really about the balance of all. Yeah,
Mishima says on page 27, his own scanning experience is enough to furnish me with innumerable examples of timid minds encased with bulging muscles. So he's not okay with that. You have to have both for him, I think. I don't think it is vanity, is it, Karl?
Well, just because vain people do the same things that serious people do doesn't mean that what serious people do is vanity. So imagine you go to the zoo. Okay, you go to the zoo and they've got a lion. Okay, and you go to the lion exhibit, and this is a fat lion. This is a sad lion. I don't know. The lion's happy. He doesn't have to hunt. They just throw him hamburger.
But he has diabetes.
Yeah. And you look at it and you say, I want to go see the lion. And you go look at it, and it's not what it should be. It's not being the fulfillment of lionhood. It needs to look noble. It needs to look like it could kill you. It needs to have some muscle to its frame. This is no good. It shouldn't be this way. You would think the zookeepers had done something wrong. The lion doesn't have an intellect, as far as we know. It can't make these decisions. Well, now, pretend you're an alien and there's a human zoo. And you go see the humans. And you see a human with no muscle and a whole bunch of fat just sitting around eating Cheetos off his chest.
Is the human enclosure a cube farm?
Is that what a human is? These are...
At this human zoo?
No, they have free-range humans.
Your pee is more yellow. You can tell there's more vitamins in it. The free-range humans. It's like a good egg yolk.
Yeah, but we do this all the time with things that are not humans. We say, this is the way it ought to look.
Yeah.
I trimmed my clematis vines
sensitive.
because they weren't looking right. Because there's a way that they ought to look.
You trimmed what?
Clematis? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's flowers.
I trim my vine once every 4 or 5 days as well.
I'm actually talking about a plant. Matt Reynolds.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But you have an idea what it's. Your roses, they're supposed to look a certain way.
Sure.
If you cook food, it's supposed to come out a certain way. We have hierarchical categories of being. There are things that we don't have any problem saying it ought to be that way, and then we come to the human and we stop.
Yeah, for Mishima, it's not even an ought. Like, you ain't human unless you are those things, or not fully human, or as human as you possibly could be. Another thing I've said that gets me in trouble, I like to repeat the things I say that get me in trouble, is like, there are things that are part of the experience of being a male, a man, a human with this kind of pudenda. I'm gonna use that every day for the next week, pudenda. Spirit, right?
But you have to use the word spiritual before it because it makes it that much weirder.
I think that's a good band name.
Karl's going to play tambourine. To be married is part of it, I think. Some people would disagree with this. To have to raise children, to get in a fist fight. Like, there are certain things that are part of the male experience, and the degree to which you don't do all of those things is the degree to which you have not partaken in maleness. And there are a lot of things like that I haven't done. I've not been in armed combat. That is something that, in Greece, it would have been expected, or for Mishima's great-grandparents,
Sure.
So there are a lot of those things that I haven't experienced and frankly don't want to. Scared of it. But deadlifting something heavy enough that your vision goes black is one of the things that people can do. And because it's one of the things that they can do, and there's all kinds of virtue associated with it, I think they should. There are all kinds of things that we can do that there aren't virtues associated with, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I can go into why I think that it's a good thing to do, and because it's possible for you to do a good thing, I think you should do it. And then you're more fully what you can be. You have partaken in those virtues as at least more. Maybe not as much as you can, but at least more. In addition to the action, I know, Matt, you're really interested in like doing the work, experiencing the hardship, making yourself do the thing that you intellectually maybe don't want to do. In addition to that, though, he wants us to look like that. Like, he wants us to be the embodiment of, he wants you to, like, when you do these things, you look a certain way.
Right.
He wants to see that. But not only does he want to see it, but he wants the muscles. And at some point in here, he says that he lacked the muscles that were necessary to have a proper dramatic death. So pretty early in his life, like maybe it is late 20s to early 30s, like, I don't look good enough to die well.
Yeah, to even perform ritual suicide in the case of war, the most honorable way to die, he's like, I am not worthy to perform ritual suicide in the midst of war because I look like crap. I got to get this fixed. If I'm gonna stick a knife in my belly and turn it, I better look better for that. It's so weird. But I would hope none of the listeners are that's kind of the ultimate goal for them is ritual suicide. But
it's up there.
Certainly that is probably about as voluntarily hard as you could possibly get. But you know what's not? You talked about anybody can deadlift, and everybody should deadlift to the point at some point that they deadlift enough weight that like the octave of the music drops to 2 octaves and your sight goes black. But you don't start there.
I can't deadlift that much. I can squat that much.
But you don't start there, right? You start conservative and you work your way up. Like you start moving that direction. And I was like, we haven't even touched on the sun part. Like, what's been around longer, the sun or humans? Right?
The sun.
In what percentage of human history have we been going out into the sun? Well, in fact, it's probably less than 100% all the way up into the last 30 years. And then we decided that the sun was evil and it will give everyone cancer and everyone will die if they go out in the sun. And yet for all of human history, it's the same thing. There's this look that you have when you've been working and toiling outside, when you've built the muscles, that idea when we think of like farm strong, we're all Midwestern guys, those those kids that were baling hay at 16, 17, 18 years old that were working on the farm, and they get the tan from the sun and the muscles from the work. And that's not enough. You can't stop there, but how many people have never experienced that at all? I think about going on vacation to beach vacations, and the people who go on a beach vacation and they are literally wearing long sleeves, long shirt, the giant hat. And I'm like, why would you go to Cancun? Why would you even come here? Like, you're so terrified of the thing that humans have been exposed to for all of human history. Like, how bizarre. And so you start to think about, like, if as we start to go down the line of where's a good place to start, like Karl, you were talking about, you need to go plant your radishes. We're the same thing. We're working on our garden this week. That's a great place to start. Go out and get in the sun and do some basic manual labor in the sun. It's incredibly satisfying. And he saw the same thing. The sun does this thing to your skin, does this thing to your, begins to give you the appearance of, and not fake, right? Because again, there are tanorexics, right? We see that all the time. We're not talking about joining the tanning salon and going and laying in the unnatural bed every day or every other day to turn your skin dark brown. We're talking about actually getting in the sun.
I can get 8 minutes of the turbo tan though, or I can go out and work all day.
That's right.
Come on, man. Like, I want my
That's right.
instant tan.
There's a bit in here where Mishima talks about he can tell by the pallor of other people's skin, the sort of person they are. The kind that sit inside as I sit in a basement on a Zoom call. We're all as far away from nature as we could possibly be. I don't think it's right. We have an inversion. I did a talk a while back, and I looked at nobility and how it's changed. And so you read the Greeks, and the nobility is like Achilles, who is pretty impressive, bigger than everybody, faster than everybody, and all the other kings are just like it. They all have to fight. And then we go to, if you look at paintings of kings of France, and they're skinny, their shoulders are narrow, their skin is pale. If they went out in public, they would put powder on it to make it more pale. They would wear wigs so that you couldn't see their hair. And the nobility becomes more and more shrunk. And
what happened?
I don't know. I think, look, even back in Homer, my favorite author in the world, the women folk that are high-class women folk will be called white-armed, like white-armed Hera. And I don't think that's referring, I think that's because they don't have to go in the sun and do any work.
Sure.
And so not being tan became a sign of wealth.
Prosperous.
And privilege. And then people would seek that out.
I'm prosperous myself.
Yeah. Like the Rubens paintings, all those prosperous ladies that he painted.
I like it. Still a fan. Still a fan. 2021.
Yeah, but it's weird how it's shifted, and I think it needs to shift back. I think you need to get out in the sun. You need to do stuff. You probably need to lift. We can help you. And for me, so I just did my lousy deadlifts. I'm not a good deadlifter. The pitch never changes when I deadlift. It's not heavy enough. But I'm in my head all the time, and then I did press and deadlift today, and there's whatever was on the barbell. That's what I got to lift. And the mind shuts off for me. And I don't know if you guys think the same way, but to shut the mind off is a good thing.
Yeah.
If it's running all the time, it's like, shut up, pull this barbell off the ground. And you can't, my deadlift is heavy enough that I can't think while I do it. We joke people get dumb when they have weight on their back. They do. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I always think about, I don't feel like my brain shuts off as much as I think it is laser focused on the simplest of things. Like I'm not thinking through all of the physiology or the physics or the mechanics of the lift when I'm lifting. It's the one thing. And there's this bizarre level of focus that occurs. But the focus is very simple. It's not like when you're doing a high order task, where your brain is just firing on. It's not that at all. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to go through that.
You said it's not like doing a high order task. I think maybe it could be. When you're squatting real heavy, you can't multitask.
Right.
A PR, a personal record attempt on your back, and you unlock the knees and hips, you're headed for the ground. You can't be thinking about, okay, when I get done here, I've got to go pick milk and I need to call. So you can't do it. And the immense pressure on the soles of your feet and the bar on your back won't let you go think about anything else. Evolution or the great magnet or whatever it was that has caused us to be the way we are. When the stakes go up, we tend to get very, very focused. And the squat in particular can help teach people how to do that. I think what we do when we quote unquote are multitasking is we're switching very rapidly from one single thing to another single thing.
Yeah, it means you're scattered.
Yep.
You're scattered. And to become one, let me get metaphysical, to take the scattered self and become one self in one moment. These are the best moments in your life. And believe it or not, a heavy squat is one of those.
Every aspect of you is aligned with that single task at hand right there, which is to get up out of the hole and rack that thing again. I didn't have my phone on silent last night. And this friend of mine texted me at 2 a.m., my friend Dustin. And he had seen a video of Jen Thompson on Instagram doing squat walkouts. I love Jen Thompson, by the way. Huge bencher. 30, I don't know, late 30s woman, benching in the mid 300s.
I was going to say probably early 40s.
Yeah, she could be. She might be 42, something like that. Benching in the mid to high 300s.
Yeah.
She's super strong. And
at 132 pounds.
Yeah, at a time you would never. I mean, she looks fit and she looks strong, but she does not look like a bodybuilder.
Is she bulky?
She just looks like a nice looking.
She was doing squat walkouts at 5.
Is she bulky?
She's not bulky.
And in my friend, he's like, WTF? Why would anybody do this? And he isn't in the area where he's testing, maxes or anything, singles yet. He's got, I've got him chase triple 3 rep PRs, but that ain't nothing like a max single. And I told him, it takes some practice. And if you put an extra 150 pounds on the bar and walk it out, your brain is going to learn a lot about what it takes to do that. So when it's showtime, you're going to be ready. 555, if she probably squats 400 would be my guess, something like that. And put 555 on there, her body's learning a whole lot of stuff. And then you stand there for 20 seconds and you rack it.
Sure. For your listeners that don't know, it's just almost everybody knows what a squat is. The squat down, squat back up. Obviously, we get real pedantic about how to do that exactly right. But we're literally talking about what she was doing was putting 555 pounds on a barbell, taking it out of the squat rack with it on her back.
For 15 seconds.
And walking backwards with it for 2 steps, probably standing there for a few seconds, and then walking forward with it for 2 steps and putting it back into the rack. Like literally it's just taking a few steps backwards and a few steps forward with an ungodly amount of weight. Now, why? Why is she doing it?
Yeah. What's the heaviest walkout you've ever done, Karl?
615.
Oh, Lord. I've got a story. Well, what do we do in Strongman? And for those of you who've seen World's Strongest Man, I one time at a competition had to do a 70-foot-long yoke run, which is a squat walkout. It's basically standing up with weight on your back, and I had to go down the street 70 feet with 1,030 pounds on my back. You think I'm like this? It's not a Reynolds exaggeration. 1,030 pounds. You stand up with it, and it only moves about 2 inches. It's like it clears the ground by about 2 inches, but it's over 1,000 pounds on your back. And then you see who can run the fastest down the road with it on your back. Just ridiculous sport, by the way. It's a terrible idea, but it's oh man.
I haven't really done walkouts, so it was just a 615 attempt.
Right.
Yeah, don't tell my coach I don't want to do them. Yeah, so I think it's probably better than yoga, better than meditation, as far as focusing the self into a kernel.
Well, she wasn't thinking about the groceries.
No.
That's the point, right? She wasn't thinking about the fight she had with her husband the night before or any of the other stressful stuff. She was thinking about don't die right now with this weight on my back. And that seems scary, I'm sure, to people who've never done it before, but there's actually something that's incredibly freeing about it. Isn't this what you see all the time, is that often the thing that people will attach and they'll say, God, I just feel like I would just, like it's, like they would be in bondage to it, is actually the thing that often we feel most free being able to do. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like that kind of stuff is actually, it's the opposite of being in bondage to the thing. It actually sets me free from the rest of the crap. Being able to do the heavy lifts, being able to refine my body by sun and steel allows me to actually break the bondage of all the other junk that I deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I read some more Mishima?
Oh, yeah. We got a book here, yeah.
Yeah, we do have a book. This is excellent, though. On page 25, I think, there's a parallel between, strangely that I should mention this on Online Great Books, but a parallel between barbells and books. The nature of this steel is odd. I found that as I increased its weight little by little, the effect was like a pair of scales. The bulk of muscles placed, as it were, on the other pan increased proportionately as though the steel had a duty to maintain a strict balance between the two. Little by little, moreover, the properties of my muscles came increasingly to resemble those of the steel. This slow development, I found, was remarkably similar to the progress of education, which remodels the brain intellectually by feeding it with progressively more difficult matter. And since there was always the vision of a classical ideal of the body to serve as a model and an ultimate goal, the process closely resembled the classical ideal of education. I just think that's perfect. I never really thought of it as a balance. So you put more weight on the barbell and the muscle in you goes up to match the weight. You become like the steel. And I love the image of it being like classical education. Classical education, a lot of it is, we read these things because, in our opinion, the smartest people read these things. And you want to be like them. And so you have the classical ideal in education, and then if you think of statues like that famous one of Perseus, buck naked holding the head of Medusa and a sword in his hand, and that's the classical idea. That's what you want to be like. So there's an ideal in the physical and an ideal in the mental, and you get there the same way.
And I tell people all the time, whether it's about books or barbell training, like the time is going to pass. Are you going to have read the stuff, or are you going to be stronger? Because the time's going to pass. So you do a little bit every day, and the time goes by, and then at the end of that, whatever that time is, you have what your work has gotten you. Hopefully. Well, no, you will, actually. I don't have to say hopefully. You will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me go back to this strongman stuff. All right, so I can hear some of our listeners are probably thinking, strongman, that's crazy. Well, yeah, it is, but it's so much fun. I've only done it as a spectator, and I got to be 6 feet away from Brian Shaw and watch him do one of those yoke runs up the hill at the Arnold Classic. And it's incredible. It's inspiring. I don't know how to describe it. It's that there are people who can do these amazing things is glorious. And to see it is the same thing. And Mishima says somewhere in there, people are going to say, well, what are they doing? That's crazy. He says, I have yet to hear hero worship mocked by a man endowed with what might justly be called heroic physical attributes. So I'm no Brian Shaw, and I never will be, but I've lifted a bit, and I see that, and I'm like, that's amazing. He's not doing it for health reasons, I know, but it's amazing and wonderful. I don't know if I'm expressing myself appropriately, but but if I were, 155 pounds, I might look at it and say, well, actually, that's not healthy.
Right. Or he's stupid, or I'm smart.
Well, isn't that I remember a couple years ago posting, Rachel had my wife. It's a family affair for us. We lift together. We love it. I love lifting with my wife. And I'm a lot stronger than my wife. I've been lifting for years. She's pretty strong too. Scott's the same way. Charity's super strong. Rachel had competed for the first time and had done really well and had lifted pretty heavy weights. She had squatted 347 pounds and deadlifted 402 as a 40-year-old soccer mom. And either we had posted it, we're not really on Facebook or social media, somebody had posted maybe and tagged her. And it was amazing how the most unhealthy members of her family then judged her publicly about how unhealthy that was for her and how all of the muscle would one day turn to fat. And these are the people who drink a case of Busch Light and smoke 3 packs of cigarettes every single day and are already 80 pounds overweight. No one else who had been pursuing hard things physically, not even strength, right? I've never had anybody who runs marathons who it's completely different physical attribute, physical thing. I've never had any of those people post on our Facebook and tell us how stupid we are for lifting weights. Because even they know the dedication that it takes to do a hard thing. What's amazing is that the people who are the sloths who, treat their body like it's just this thing to throw in the trash will judge others. And I think that's what you saw. When you saw Brian Shaw, you were in awe. Mm-hmm. But, there are members of our family and members of people that we deal with on a daily basis who would look at that and say, that's crazy, and he should be thrown in prison for it or whatever. It's
Still?
What is he, 6'9"?
Yeah, and about 440.
Yeah, just amazing.
It's a big boy. Nephilim.
There were giants on the earth in those days.
Yeah, it makes me believe in it. Seriously, I'm going to go, all right, that's possible. I've seen Shaw and Thor.
I think Mishima's right. I think the more that we partake in the heroic, the more we're able to recognize it and appreciate it. So what do we do if you live in a nation where there is no physical culture, there is no heroicism, or scared of everything? And if you can get some, how will that person be treated? The person that does this necessary thing that's heroic, not having a healthy physical culture. I don't know if it's a sign of societal decay or a cause of it or both, but it's pretty spooky. Pretty spooky. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Mishima, obviously towards the end of his life, which didn't last very long. He was talking about death, I think, and it was something about the best thing is to die in a glorious cause. And then he looks in the camera and says, but there are no glorious causes anymore. Which I think was his problem, which is he tried to manufacture one. At the end, I'm not planning to take that choice. But I think one of the best things that Matt Reynolds ever did was come up with the voluntary hardship thing.
Which I didn't come up with, just FYI.
Where'd you get it from?
I think I first heard it actually from I think the term I heard from Mr. Money Mustache on an interview on a podcast. But I remember stopping the podcast when he said the word. And of course, he was talking about living on $20,000 a year so you could retire at 35. Mm-hmm. But I stopped the podcast and sat and thought about, well, this is what we do. This is what strength training is. This is what we're doing. We're choosing to do the thing that's hard.
And I know there's people out there that mock it and say, well, it's not real hardship, and if it's voluntary, it's not hardship. That's true, I guess, in a sense. Mishima, I was reading up on him. I think he wanted to go die for the emperor, and he had a cold and was sick, and he didn't qualify. Well, the only way he's going to die for the emperor is if Japan is at war. Okay? What if they're not at war? Do you then lead a life where you don't have hardship? I hope that there's not war. I hope that my kids don't get drafted and have to go into a war. I would rather we live in peace and prosperity. But you still need the hardship. Yeah. And you got to get it somehow for your physical well-being and for your intellectual well-being. So I'm reading Mishima thinking, this is Japanese Matt Reynolds.
All right.
I want to keep my eye on him. He's got stuff ahead of him.
Even the soldiers, right? Even the best of soldiers have to perform voluntary hardship so that they are ready when the involuntary hardship is thrust upon them, right? We don't take a 18-year-old kid out of high school and drop him in Afghanistan and go and say, go. Like that's why you go to basic. That's why. Now, certainly we can argue if there's enough voluntary hardship that we're currently putting soldiers through. And but like that's the idea. Like you don't go to war without training for war. You don't compete in strength sports without training for the strength sport. You can't get real tan until you've been out in the sun for 2 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and then 12, and so on and so forth.
I am a online coach, and because I am who I am, I get a certain kind of client. And right now, I am absolutely lousy with baby boomers. This has nothing to do with the book, but it's just on my mind. It's heavy on my heart, Matt. And since I don't get to go on Barbell Logic all the time, and this is going to be simulcast on Barbell Logic, so Barbell Logic people can listen to this. These baby boomers are killing me, Matt. I'm talking about you, Charlie. You know it, and others. Anyway, you were talking about training for war, and to train for something, you really need to simulate that thing as much as you can. I think that's pretty obvious that if you're going to train for war, that you would need to use some live fire exercises, and that playing jacks is not going to help that, right? And his bench press, he's benching 80 for 3x5. He has some shoulder problems, so that he has to use a narrower grip than I would like, so he doesn't use as much muscle mass as maybe he might. But, his shoulder's 63 years old. So that's what we do. And he's got a dead spot that he has a hard time getting through to the lockout. So I've been having him do bench press lockouts from the dead spot as a supplement 1 day a week. He says, Scott, and he's done them twice. 2 weeks. He's done them twice. And they weren't heavy enough the first day because you're just guessing what it's going to be, right? As the programmer, I'm kind of guessing where they need. I mean, they weren't heavy enough, and he's old, so I'm not going to just drive him into the ground. And he emailed me. He said, hey, man, I've had a lot of luck with diamond push-ups in the past. I'd like to do those instead. And I was like, no, absolutely not. That's the dumbest thing.
Sure.
I was like, ah.
Well, it's one of the greatest things that we're able to find as coaches for our clients is when we find the thing that they're the worst at. And I always try to explain that to my clients. Like when I find the supplemental lift that they really hate, and you compare that supplemental lift. So that supplemental lift is just a similar variation to the main lift. When we use that term supplemental lift, that's what we mean. When they have to reduce the weight by like 40%, and they're like, "Why is this so hard?" You're like, "We found it. We found the thing." Right? Like we found it's trite, but we found the weak link in the chain, and now we get to make it stronger via voluntary hardship. If we just do the thing we're great at, is it really that hard? Is it really that hard? And so we find that's one of the, to me, that's the light bulb moment as a coach when I'm able to find the thing that is the true weak point for my clients. Then I go, ooh, we can fix this, and now it won't be the weak point anymore. That's right.
We find the muscle that modernity has taken out of use, like Mishima says, and have him do those press or pin bench presses, from that dead spot. So here's the speech I've been getting my baby boomer clients. When I did a new client phone call, and I've been telling them this: no social comparison. Your squats are going to look terrible. Your hips are in their 7th decade. You've never done this before. Don't look at anybody else. Don't look at. I don't want to, because these boomers do this to me all the time. They're like, I don't know why my squat doesn't look like so and so's. It's like, well, your bones are different lengths, and you're old, so no social comparison. And then the other one is, there's 3 points. The other one is number 2. 60's not the new 40. You're elderly. And I'm the first person that's ever told these people they're elderly. I've got a guy, I told him yesterday, I was like, new client call. These people are mostly, the clients I get are new to physical culture. They're taking up Mishima's challenge for the time at 64 years old. And I was like, you are elderly. He's like, oh, I'm doing great. I was like, shut up. You go file paperwork for Medicare in 7 months. You're elderly. And then number 3 is, you hired me. You might be a baby boomer, and you might have loved the Beach Boys in 66, but you don't know shit about this. That's why you hired me. So listen, and I'm going to help you, and I will make you stronger. Be as a child.
If I were your baby boomer client, all of my lifting videos would have like Steely Dan and other Margaritaville.
George and Buffett in there. But, and you and I did the podcast for so many years on Barbell Logic, is that it's we actually celebrate the fact that they've chosen to start this journey. I think what we're doing and what you're doing often is that you're making sure that you're managing the expectations.
Oh, you bet.
They think, like, listen, you're not going to look like this, Masters athlete that just won the CrossFit Games in the Masters, who's been doing athletic stuff their entire life, has incredible genetics, and has been taking drugs for 25 years. That's not going to be you, right? You're doing this to stay out of the nursing home. You're doing this to be able to get in and out of your car. You're doing this to get off the toilet, right? And while I understand that in the beginning that maybe feels like a really low standard, and it is in the beginning, that we're going to drive up that standard line is going to slowly increase, and the goal is to increase your quality of life so that you live the longest high quality of life you possibly can. And we often have to have that conversation with clients. It's a lesson in reality.
Oh, 60 is the new 30, Matt.
Yeah. Do you remember all the shit that we took years ago when we told people when they were 35 that your testosterone is tanking and you need to understand that you're not 25 anymore, that 35 is not 25. You're not, and everybody was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And we're like, listen, man, you guys, you're knocking on it. You're at master's age. It's what's considered a master, which means old. And it's the word they use for old in powerlifting. And
so this is what I think. I think 40 is the new 60.
That's right. That's right.
I like it. I want to get a shirt that says that. That's the best.
Right. Hey, my lawnmower's just rang my doorbell. I'm going to step away really quick.
Now we can say the things we really wanted to say. So Mishima said he lacked the muscle to have a dramatic death, and he's preoccupied with death. And we're only about halfway through the book here, and the more the book, the more it's about death, and it's a little much. But I was like, you know what? That's exactly right. Like maybe I don't want to commit Harry Carey on ABC trying to reinstate the, I don't know, Confederacy or something. I don't know, whatever lost cause like he did. But laying in a nursing home with sores isn't a heroic, remarkable death either. Our friend Dr. Sullivan says that he wants to have like a massive heart attack at like age 85 while hiking with his wife that's 30 years younger than him. I think is what he said. We want to cult. Right. He talks about he do weight train so he can. What does he call it? He says he wants to collapse the morbidity. Like he wants to be sick. He doesn't want to be sick at all. Like he wants to live a full life. I agree with Mishima about that. You don't have to want to, off yourself in public for a great cause.
Okay, so one thing I really like about it, now the stuff on death is a bit much, especially for Western sensibilities. Yeah, it does get to be a bit much. On the other hand, you are in fact going to die. Okay, this might be news, but everybody who's listening to this is going to die. Hopefully not, today, but at some point. Your life has an expiration. Do you ever think about the expiration? What do you want it to be like? It's going to happen whether you deal with it or not. On 28, a powerful tragic frame and sculpturesque muscles were indispensable in a romantically noble death. Well, I don't know that I care so much about a noble death on television, but I'm going to go out at some point. I would like to go out in the right way. I'd like to be, I don't know when that's going to be. I would like it to be doing good things. I would like it to be doing the same things I'm doing now. I'd like to not have to stop, to not have to sit in a chair the rest of my life. I don't think that's noble.
Yeah, wasting away is about as bad as it gets. That's not the way we want to die.
Yeah, we read a lot. We've read.
Yeah, that's true.
We did Wendell Berry a couple times, Scott. We've doubled up on Wendell Berry. Matt, have you ever read Wendell Berry?
I have not.
Might like it. He's a farmer in Kentucky. It's all about the Port William membership. The same characters show up in all of the books.
Cry and cry and cry, Matt. They're so good.
I'll get it for sure.
But the characters all have an expiration, and the best ones are, he was out in the fields and he died. That, to me, that's ideal.
Sure.
You get up that morning, you think, well, I got to move the cows to the new pasture. I'm going to go do it because it's what you always do. And you go out and do it, and your time comes. You're doing the thing that you're supposed to do. You're not sitting on the couch watching television, but you're out doing stuff, and then you're dead.
Yep.
That's it. Well, how do you make yourself capable of doing that? You have to tend your physical well-being.
You said, well, everybody knows that we're going to die someday. You have an expiration date. Not everybody knows that, Karl. I was running a seminar the other day, and a guy said, well, it won't be long here. We're going to have this transhumanism stuff and organ transplants, blah, blah, blah. And scientists know that there are just a few genes that program cell death. If we can just turn those off, then we'll just live until. There are actually people that don't believe it. I hope they stop listening.
Yeah, Heinlein used to have a series of books about a guy who, just lived forever. that eventually we would figure this out, and you just live forever. And well, Heinlein's dead, so it's going to happen. And I think healthier humans, we're not so healthy on this matter. Healthier humans know it. And they're more concerned about living a good life than an infinitely long life because they know you can't. So Mishima talks about the Greeks had this idea that if you died young, it was actually a blessing. Well, you were going to die.
Coming to the reality of and really understanding that you're going to die, there's two responses to it. You can get depressed about it and feel like in bondage to death, or you can feel completely freed by the thing. If I'm going to die, then I have the opportunity to live the most noble, honorable life that I can. And here are all the things that I can put in place to make sure I do that. I actually think like, the old movie Groundhog Day, talk about hell, right? Like that's hell. Like you're going to live the same day over and over again for eternity. It's never going to end. Who wants to do that? Why would you want to live forever? That sounds awful.
And then the romantic lead is Andy McDowell. I'm not a fan.
Strong jawline. Yeah, I mean,
that's a jaw. On page 31, it was that sense of existence in which we normally believe in such a half-hearted manner, which they had transformed into a kind of transparent sense of power. It is this that I refer to as their abstract nature. As my resort to the steel had suggested to me, the relationship of muscles to steel was one of interdependence, very similar, in fact, to the relationship between ourselves and the world. The weights teach us about reality in the world. I said earlier about the people popularly now, if you work with your hands, you're less, whatever. And as a result of that, people kind of stay away from their physical being. And there are so many consequences of that. And one is they really aren't tied to reality in any concrete way. If you live in an apartment somewhere and don't own an automobile, a tiny apartment in some huge metropolitan area, you're probably going to take most of your meals out, not even going to prepare much food there because you can't. I mean, just everything is unreal. Like I know that somehow you exist, urban apartment dweller, but all of the things that happen in reality so that you can exist are so far removed that they can't be aware of it. Their lives are too busy, and I understand. They can't be aware of it. And then they go vote. Like, what do they know about the food? They didn't take shop. Like, what do they know about how the water gets to them? One of the things I hate about voting is I'm supposed to be an expert on everything. I have to go up on wastewater treatment so I can figure out whether I should vote yes on the bond issue for the wastewater. Like, I'm supposed to know about everything. I hate that because I'm keenly aware that I don't know everything. And so I don't vote on most things when I go to the polls. Like, if I can see they've got all these judges on there, I don't know who they are, so I don't even vote. Yep. And they're like, you just always vote out the incumbents. I think, shut up. Like, what if there's a good one? Like, I just don't vote. But they work in the cubicle, they work from home, whatever. But they don't lift weights. They don't understand that people get hurt doing all of the stuff that has to happen so that they can be. I've got a friend that wears this hat that says, "I farm, you eat." Those guys get hurt doing that stuff, and they're at enormous financial risk. And can you have a society where people vote if there are huge numbers of people who are out of touch with all the conditions that have to occur in order for them to have calories? Well, I don't think you can, but even if you're in one of these, if you live in town and you're in that situation, maybe you can't do some woodworking because you don't have a place to do it. I get it. Go to the gym and lift some weights.
It's a start. It's something.
There are lots of things that you can do that will improve your life, right? That will improve your quality of life, having financial freedom or having a better marriage, or there's a lot of these things that have been proven to improve your quality of life. It's actually a lot more difficult to do those two things. And I'm not in the business of marriage counseling, and I'm not Dave Ramsey, and I'm not trying to. But what I do know is that it actually doesn't really matter if you are what your demographic is, if you live in the city or the country, if you are 70 years old or 80 years old or 16 years old or anything in between. Literally, it doesn't matter who you are, that you can pick up the steel barbells with the iron on it. And if you do it for the right reasons, it will make you better. It will make you a better person. It'll make you better physically. Mm-hmm. It will make you better mentally, emotionally, socially. It does for everybody. If you do it for the right reasons. I actually think that most people are actually get better from it, even when they don't start it for the right reasons. I think it often makes people better. I mean, most of us have no clue what we're doing when we get started doing this thing. But if you specifically do it for the wrong reasons, right? How many times do you watch the middle-aged person go to the gym and they neurotically over-exercise and lose a bunch of weight, and the next thing you know, you find out they're having an affair, right? Like there are certainly some things that can be steered in the wrong direction. But if the goal here for us is to do the hard things, some of those hard things, not as hard as going to war, not as hard as losing a child or having to deal with major tragedies, like those involuntary pieces of hardship. Certainly, we're not comparing it to that, but it is a step that we can all make. And I think that
are his motivations.
I think that he saw that as something that he had never done for the first 30 years of his life, and saw that there was something missing.
Attempting to restore Imperial Japan?
Well, no. I mean, well, maybe, but no. The taking in the sun and traditional bodybuilding.
Well, I don't know. I'm no Yukio Mishima, but I do words all the time. I feel him. To get away from that is a big attraction of barbells for me. I think too much. See, I'm even thinking about that. I think too much, but then I have to have second thoughts. I think too much. Do I really think too much? You people out there without an internal monologue, I think you're the blessed ones. So for me, I find a parallel with Mishima in that I can see where he's coming from, and I get it. I think it's a big help. I think the sun part's important. We read a book a while back, Matt. What is it? Holistic Land Management. It's a book on ranching. It doesn't sound like it'd be fun, but it's great fun. Who was the author of that one?
Alan Savory.
Alan Savory has this term, the solar dollar, in there, that you want to manage your land so that you can get the most out of the solar dollar, because the sun is the ultimate source of all the wealth on the planet. It's where the fossil fuels came from. It's where the food you eat comes from. It's the source of everything. And I think getting in touch with that, you don't need to tan 5 hours a day necessarily, but you ought to go out in the sun. We know that's healthy. We know, heck, this current crisis, we know that the people with lower vitamin D have a much harder time. So you people that are hiding from the sun, you have a much harder time with COVID-19. Get out in the sun, plant something. I don't know if Mishima had a garden. He's Japanese. He probably did.
He had a
single
bonsai tree. And then one day he cut it off at the ground because that was his destiny.
You don't know that. You're making that up.
I am making that up.
No, but I think lift heavy things and make contact with the sun. I think you'll be better off.
Yeah.
I think that you have a hard time being worse off for having done that.
Yeah. You'll certainly learn more about yourself. And I think that's really what this is. This is really a memoir of what he was learning about himself in the process of this. I think he started to do this thing and wasn't entirely sure why, wasn't entirely sure what the end result was going to be. That I think that's why you see it turn towards. Do you think he thought, Scott looked at me with this?
Yeah.
Even from the beginning, you think he knew that it was going to end in death?
Yes.
It's interesting. It doesn't. It certainly doesn't start that way at all, and it becomes more that as the. So unless he's walking us through, and of course he's an acclaimed novelist, so the guy was, maybe he knew what the path he was taking us down. But I wonder if when he started to do this and he started to view himself as a warrior, if he knew the way this was going to end. Maybe he did.
I think he did. I don't know if he did when he was 15, but he does say during World War II that he had volunteered for a suicide platoon. He wasn't going to be a kamikaze. He was not a pilot. I think he was an infantryman. So he had volunteered for a suicide duty, but turned up sick when that happened and wasn't able to do it. So
had a cold.
So even as a young person,
because he might die of the cold, right?
Isn't that weird? They wouldn't let him go because he was sick?
Well, the thing about the suicide platoon is they got to go take out a whole bunch of guys first.
Sure.
And he's having the sniffles. Maybe he can't kill us. and then he talks about he became aware that his lack of muscle would prevent him from having a dramatic and glorious death. By 20 years old, I think between 15 and 20 years old, I think he was kind of in there. So I think we are all in agreement with his love of the sun and physical culture. So he starts with the weightlifting, and then later on he takes up kenpo, which is traditional Japanese fencing using the bamboo sword, boxing. I think that we probably would all think that some of those martial arts or something like that would be helpful as well. Do we believe that words are corrosive, though? Their abstract functions and how they don't map onto reality.
even though I work for Online Great Books, where we throw a whole lot of words at you, I think they can be a substitute for action. I don't think they're always corrosive. I'm going to go read me some more Mishima. So obviously, I don't think they're always corrosive, but they certainly can be.
Yeah, certainly they can be. Like you can use a knife to prepare dinner or kill somebody. I think that he says that when we use words, we attempt to map some sort of order onto reality that doesn't actually exist. And we use words to tame that chaos that exists in reality.
It feels like by the time you get to this book, which is his last book, right, is before his death, that if he had his choice, he would live his life as sort of a silent samurai, a silent warrior who would never speak. And yet, if he did, he couldn't tell us about it in the very book that we're reading. And so I can imagine the battle that was going on with him internally to have to still explain, well, here's why the words were corrosive for me, especially for all of these years. And then I think for him, he would say that most of the words remained corrosive, that it was better, it would be better, the wordless. Like you said, what can you convey
action
without words at all? And yet the only way we know he thought that way was because he put it in words and wrote it in a book.
Words are a problem. I mean, the word dog is not a dog. There's a disconnect between the words that we use, these symbols that we hopefully universally hold, and the things they're supposed to represent. I found this little section here. He says, words armed with their abstract function originally put in their appearance as a working of the logos designed to bring order to the world of concrete objects. And expression was essentially an attempt to turn the abstract functioning back on itself, and like an electric current that flows in reverse, summon up a world of phenomena with the aid of words alone. So he thought he could use his words to summon up this world of phenomena before he decided that he needed to use his body for something. But These words are these abstract things, a working of the logos that map onto the concrete objects well enough, and it makes reality look more orderly than it is, I think, for Mishima. Yeah, all of our libertarian friends, they're like, well, they got all these words. Efficient market theory, blah, 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 blah. They got all these words. Well, okay. Now go govern, go actually act, make it happen.
Yeah. Every judgment that you utter, every statement that you make is in some sense a lie. That's a tree. Well, no, not really, because tree refers to the concept of tree. But the thing you're pointing at is a physical tree, and the physical tree is not a concept of a tree. So you have the concrete tree and then the abstract notion of tree. And so it's going to be fake.
Can I say that is that tree?
Yeah, but tree is a conceptual word. It's pointing to a meaning, not to an object.
Yeah, it's conceptual all the way down.
And that's where there is a danger. Well, there's a danger. We talked about that sometimes we do this Walker Percy essay, The Loss of the Creature, which you also might like, Matt Reynolds, where he talks about going to see the Grand Canyon and that you can't actually go see it because there's all sorts of concepts already surrounding the thing. There's a way you're supposed to experience it. The tour guides are not going to help you because they're going to tell you the way to look at it. They're going to substitute the conceptual for the actual. Obviously, we need concepts, but that's a danger, especially when words are your trade, to get stuck in concepts all the time and to think that the conceptual world's actually the real world. And so I can say a lot of words about stuff, like that old priest who yelled at me, well, you're good with words, you're still screwing up. Solving something conceptually does not mean you've solved it. Winning an argument doesn't mean you've gained a new friend. Because the friend is a concrete person and you just won an abstract thing. Congratulations. It's no good.
Yes.
So for me, what was interesting, I've said this before, what was interesting is for him, the barbells are a way for him to escape, to re-enter the world of the physical, which is actually the real world.
I ordered some pipe that is going to go down in my water well. 20-foot joints of 1.25 inch galvanized pipe. And I also ordered some sucker rod. So this rod goes in the middle of the pipe, and when my windmill turns, it pulls the sucker rod, pulls it and pushes it up, down, up, down, up, down, and that runs a pump in the bottom of the well and pumps water out of the ground. It was shipped on a freight line, and I got a shipping notification. It said it weighed 45 pounds. I thought, probably not. Well, the guy pulled up here at the semi-truck, and it was a covered trailer, so I couldn't get it off of there with my tractor. And I walked up in there, and I grabbed it. It's pretty heavy. Like, heavy. And I grabbed, not 45 pounds, but there are 20-foot joints of pipe, and they were all bundled together with steel bands, so it was a bundle of these pipes.
Not 45
and I grabbed it, and it's 1.25 inches, so it's a fat bar deadlift. And I got that thing 1 inch away from my shins. And I stood up, and it's a 20-foot long bar. Elephant bar. And I'm 6'2", and I could not stand up enough to get the ends off the ground.
Wow.
But I could move it. I guarantee it weighed 550. But it was so long, I could get to lockout and move it around. It's reality unless you never actually do anything. And then you can pretend like weightlifting isn't reality. You can pretend like life isn't actually a series of interactions with physical objects, and it's just pressing keys and clicking mice. You can put on your Oculus Rift headset and pretend like that's a real girl.
Yeah, you got to play more video games. I think that's important. Dear listener, if you haven't tried it, you should try it. And you'll be sore after the first day. But guess what? That's good. That's good news. It means you did something. It means you've actually made contact with the physical world, and your body is telling you so. I had a new trainee on yesterday, actually. 46-year-old woman wants to be able to play with her grandkids. She has a grandbaby, so she's a young grandmother. We squatted put the 15-kilo bar on her back, and that was enough. And that's all she could do. But it's the first time she's ever done anything since high school, probably. And I had to warn her, you're going to be sore, but you come back on Friday,
Sure.
and you do it again. But that soreness, like the pain, he says somewhere in here about embracing the pain. The pain is a good thing. It's something real. It means you did something. How does he say it? Something about you can't get strong without an opponent, and the steel is the opponent. And that goes into martial arts too. You can practice Bruce Lee moves out of a book, like some kids in my high school did. It doesn't mean you know how to fight. You're only going to learn to fight when you fight an opponent. The opponent's going to cause you discomfort, and the barbell's going to cause you some discomfort. We'll manage it. You know, it shouldn't be like cancer pain. It should just be barbell pain. But you got to do it, and it's real, and it's good, and I'm losing my train of thought, just like Mishima is. You got to do it. You just have to do it.
What about all Mishima's death stuff? Page 42, I could not help feeling that if there were some incident in which the violent death pangs and well-developed muscles were skillfully combined, it could only occur in response to the aesthetic demands of destiny. So,
well, I think he's suicidal. I think he has been for a long time. It doesn't mean he's wrong about the noble death.
Aesthetic demands.
Yeah, a lot of times people will throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I think that's what we have to be careful of. I'm sure you guys deal with this a lot. You study all these philosophers, right, who have some wonderful ideas and bring up some incredible arguments, and then they just seem way off in other places. And I don't know that he's way off, especially culturally. It doesn't line up for us from a Western kind of systematic, pragmatic school of thought. The way he thinks about honorable death, that is not a Western idea. It's not something that we're brought up with, so it just feels weird to me, at least. But I
Sure.
also can understand where it came from. Here's what's weird: when I read about it with the samurai, I think it's cool. Right? When you read about it, you're like, oh well, it happened 1,000 years ago. It happened 800 years ago. Then you're like, man, that's so badass that those guys did that. But then you read about it, and this guy does it in 1970, and you're like, I don't know, man. So, I mean, I agree with a ton of the stuff that he wrote in the book. I not just agree, but can empathize with it. I've felt the very things that he feels. But when it gets up to the point of sort of glorifying honorable death, I want to die honorably, just like you said. I don't want it to be suicide. I don't need to stick a knife in my belly and disembowel myself. So I draw the line.
Aesthetic demands of destiny, though. It's not just about honor. It's about
Sure.
falling like the cherry blossom.
Sure.
Death in modern America tends to look like chemo or the nursing home.
Yep.
Or whatever.
Yep.
That just ain't fair to anybody.
The longing for death is a little weird.
Nope.
However, I was thinking as you were talking, Matt, the early martyrs, if you read Ignatius of Antioch, his letters on his way to Rome to be martyred, and he says, don't stop me. Don't try to stop me. This is what I want. So it might just be that his goal, whatever it was, the restoration of Imperial Japan, is not a valid goal.
Yeah.
In our minds. Although I've been watching a lot of J-pop on YouTube, and I'm thinking it wouldn't have been so bad.
Right. Do we have enough distance between 2021 and August of 45? Can we talk about that, or is it too much? Like I said earlier in the show, like the emperor signs the surrender, and then the Marshall Plan gets rolled out, and then what is it? MacArthur's the military governor for a time, and then meanwhile, you're just a normal dude in Japan. Your religion has told you the emperor is the living embodiment of God on earth. maybe you have, there's a lot of religion going on over there. Maybe you have some version of the ancestor worship over there, where your ancestors have lived a certain way, and one of the ways that you are pious would be to continue those ways. And then this emperor goes up on that battleship and signs those papers. Now, your religion's junk. You've let down your ancestors who are part of your pantheon. Like, so if I don't know a lot about it, but yeah, there's ancestor worship there. And if you let down ancestors to some degree, it would be like letting down some aspect of deity. And so here you are, right? And so 1970s, only 25 years later. It's only 25 years after their religion was shattered. Their entire way of life is shattered. And, Perry had showed up with this only a few years before World War II. You're right. Japan had been just set on their head.
That would have been gunboat diplomacy, right? Literally?
Yeah.
Think about that. Think about how fast it occurs, right? So that's 1860, somewhere in there.
1865 or something like that.
So Japan in 1850, 1840 looks like Japan in 1540. Borders are closed, right? Like this, it's Japan. It's the shogun. It's the geisha. It's the tea. It's the ritual. And all of a sudden the borders they're forced. So in less than 100 years, they're forced to open borders and lose World War II, and the emperor no longer is put in place by God himself, no longer sits on the throne, and enter modernity. And so there were people alive that saw the whole thing. It's 80 years. Like, bro, you can see how that would completely
destroyed it.
Could throw a culture completely off its rocker.
It's the miracle to me is there weren't more shield societies. There weren't more Mishimas.
Did you ever hear about the communist candidate for prime minister was murdered on television with a samurai sword? This was around this time. There's crazy stuff happening in Japan. Political assassination, but with a sword.
Is it that crazy is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
See, it has to have a certain aesthetic flair to be a proper action with this Japanese.
I don't know.
They're kind of like the French.
Send your hate mail to Scott, not to me.
Sure.
When a few years ago, last time, and probably will be the last time, when we were in Disney World, and there was this Japanese young couple, on the boat with us on the way to Tom Sawyer's Island. And, well, he was skinnier than she was, but good-looking kids.
She killed him.
He would never just stand. He would never just stand there. He'd always, there'd be a pose, from an anime or something. He was very conscious of how he was standing and how he was presenting himself. I don't really do that. I stand like a ton of bricks.
I need you to.
Well, did you like the book, Matt?
Yeah, I really did. It was it was super interesting. It was interesting to see his thought pattern and the process. I don't know that I had ever read. It was interesting. I actually thought about Hambrick in reading this some because of it's a similar sort of. Here's a guy who was a uber intellectual, used words like crazy, and discovered this physical reality later in life. And that's not to say, Hambrick's always, he's from, as he says, the river bottoms in Catoosa, Oklahoma, and grew up doing physical labor. So it wasn't like, Hambrick had translucent skin growing up because he never saw the sun. It wasn't that at all. But it was this idea that the guy went from being an intellectual and was like, listen, there was something missing and the circle wasn't closed. And when I discovered this thing, the physical, the real world, then it all sort of started to come together and make sense. And I thought that was super interesting to read about, and certainly I can empathize as well. I don't at all consider myself an intellectual in the same way that I would consider you all that, but I was raised the very skinny Baptist preacher's kid that got bullied all the time, that had a reputation for being smart and the good test taker and the honor roll, but was, had the hunchback. I was already hunchback and had the forward head syndrome at 12. obviously something happened with me at 18, 19 years old when I really found the value of strength, and it's obviously completely changed my life, and we've built an entire career out of the thing. So, and I think we've been able to at Barbell Logic, not perfectly, but in the best we know how, connect strength training, the value of steel, the value of iron, back to these things that actually matter in life. That it's not something that's completely separate. That we do these things for improved quality of life, for not just for aesthetics, but aesthetics are a part of it. Performance is a big part of it, right? The way we interact with people around us is a big part of it. And so we're trying to do it for the right reasons, and we'll continue to pursue that. So certainly I could empathize with him.
After reading him, the quality of life, and when you said that, I thought Mishima would have no regard for that whatsoever. That phrase, I'm not even sure that he would know what we were talking about. Does he care about his telos, Karl? Is he like, I'm a man, I have bone and sinew, and as such, I have to use it?
I think he's probably a Nietzschean. I don't think he has a grand telos, a grand end. I think he wants to make a beautiful life because it's all he can do.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably right, yeah. I buy that. I love this guy. It's a train wreck. Reading this book is like watching an airplane auger into the ground.
Yeah.
And it's really great. Sound of Waves, we recommended that at the beginning of the show. It's just the sweetest, loveliest, perfect little love story in the world. You would have no idea that they came out of these two writers came out of the same mind. It's fantastic. Stellar. He's deeply concerned about beauty, so when he does decide that he's not going to lift weights and that he's going to put the pen to paper, man, he and create something beautiful and not a memoir to publish upon his death, he can do it. And it's really great.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Wow.
What are we going to read next time, Uncle Karl?
Cool.
I think we're going to do Sickness Unto Death, a nice little happy book by Soren Kierkegaard.
It sounds encouraging.
Yeah.
I don't think he lifted, and he should have. Actually, he would have been better off. There was a guy that was stuck in his head. To give an example, he writes, he had this girl, I forget her name, that he should have married, but he just can't get himself to do it. He just can't take the action. But he can write a whole bunch of books about existentialism, and pretty much invented it. But he just can't take the step of marrying the girl. It would have been good if they'd had barbells in Copenhagen in 1870 or whenever he was.
Always be closing. Did Schopenhauer lift?
Yes.
I suspect that he did.
No, I don't know.
Nobody looks grumpier than that guy. Love that.
Socrates had to.
Yeah, Socrates did.
He was a hoplite. He was a soldier. Yeah, well, this has been fun. So, you talked about intellectuals, Matt. I was just going to say that, so whenever there's a revolution, the first thing they do is kill all the intellectuals. And they're not wrong.
Right. There's another Online Great Books podcast. You can go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast. You can go to barbell-logic.com and go sign up for coaching there. Your first month is free if you want to do that. And you can ask for Karl if you want. Heck, ask for Matt, and then he won't take you. I think I'm full. I think I'm full. I've got a whole bunch.
Yep, and there's lots of good content on that website. Lots of good articles and stuff.
And then go to
It's pretty well done.
onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast, and you can sign up there. We're going to be opening enrollment, I think, on the 14th. We should be right in the middle of that. So go there and sign up. And it's been a while since we've gotten any new reviews, so go leave a review there. And, only leave good ones. Keep your bad ones to yourself. Go talk to your mom about it. Well, we'll talk to you guys next week.